Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm Meg Burton Tudman, and I am thrilled to introduce one of my favorite people, dearest friends, Leslee Schenk Trzcinski. Leslee is an alignment yoga specialist and self-professed. She is an anatomy geek with the most amazing mantra: from sound structure comes good energy, which I absolutely love and resonates on so many different levels for me. I am a huge fan of her yoga classes, and I love that her teaching is driven by the belief that when we know more about biomechanics, physiology, and the anatomical structure of the body, we are more profoundly and effectively able to go from the outer body deeply in, which, let's get real, that's really the ultimate goal in any of these practices that we have. So she is super accomplished from a sports standpoint, high level in swimming, triathlon, and equestrian. Most notably, though, she was one of the top professional cyclists in the world, medaling several times in world championships and narrowly missing the Olympic team. Upon retirement from competing, she has served for many years as an elected official on the US Olympic Committee. Her business, which is phenomenal, and I highly recommend it, is Tune Yoga, which she operates out of Rochester, New York. However, we are recording this during the pandemic, so regardless of where you are, you can get access to Leslee and her amazing workshops and classes because she's doing it all online right now. So she's been working with Tune Yoga for over a decade with a variety of clients. Doesn't matter if you are athlete or not, limited or not, she is here to serve you and has just the most brilliant gifts to offer. So again, I'm so thrilled to have you. Leslee, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see where our conversation goes today.
Well, it's absolutely an honor to be here. I mean, I love the work you do, and you're such an inspiration. And in some ways, you and I are like a polarity, right? We're kind of the physical and the energetic, but yet they all come together. And I loved your workshops. And so I think we have kind of a kindred spirit with each other. So thank you so much. I'm just honored to be here.
I completely agree. And the pleasure is all mine. I'm thrilled to have you. And I love what you said, that we seemingly appear to be on different ends of the spectrum, but in reality, I think the work that each of us is doing overlaps in the most beautiful and organic way, and really is at the heart of your business as far as going deeper. So when you're working with clients and yogis and athletes and men and women, I know that there's a vast audience that you serve and cater to. When you're trying to connect to that kind of mind, body, and spirit and go a little bit deeper than the physical level, where do you start? Like, where do you start with someone who hasn't done that integration and maybe isn't as familiar with creating balance between those different aspects of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, such a great question. Let me first clarify that mantra that I use, out of sound structure comes good energy. That was actually from BKS Iyengar, who has since passed away, but one of kind of the pivotal people to bring yoga to the Western world back in the 40s and 50s. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, great question. I mean, that's really, uh, my style of teaching is not for everyone. And that's what we have to get comfortable with, is this idea of our voice and our presence, and really what we're serving up. I mean, a lot of times I will bring bones to my class and have like a skull or a pelvic bowl or the spine. And sometimes people are like, I just want to move, I just want to breathe. It's too much anatomy.
Mhm.
But I have built a very successful business full time for the last 11 years because people really are interested in their physical body
Yeah.
and learning a little more about kind of the muscular and skeletal structure. And I mean, more and more research is showing us that we're actually not over 600 muscles. We're really just one big muscle integrated with fascia. And the fascia is integrated across our organs and all of our systems. It can have emotional intelligence and intellectual tissue. And so there's so much new research. And that's the other piece of, I think, what I bring and I make so interesting for people is that I really stay on top of current research, yoga research and exercise science research. And so it isn't just a yoga teacher, which is also important, sharing anecdotes about people. Like I have several clients who've gone off of blood pressure medicine or who don't have chronic pain anymore. But I hate to use this kind of terminology, but I have before that a lot of times, Meg, the outer body is something people can relate to.
Mhm.
And whether you're a kinesthetic person or not. And so learning a little bit about the outer body is almost a Trojan horse. And that's kind of the uncomfortable languaging, like, oh, I'm trying to trick people or fool people. I'm not trying to trick people. I'm just trying to make it almost a path of progression for
Mhm.
people. And the other piece of it is that people struggle to sometimes to set a consistent schedule and to keep coming back to the practice. And
Right.
so, trying to find what resonates with people quickly. I mean, you can't be all things to all people, but
Right.
I do find that even people that are more intellectual or mental and that they want the mental stimulus, um, you can dial up the learning around the body. Again, talking to maybe about how the stress hormones um, weaken the arteries.
Mhm.
And so the more stressed we are, we're going to absolutely impact our heart health. We're going to impact the quality of our breath. Or so using sometimes a little more data
Mhm.
and things that people can chew on a little bit more. But still talking about the energy piece, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm really careful, so I'm so long-winded right now, but
Good.
your domain, your the kind of the energy side and the chakras and some of that, I'm not even though I love studying that and
Mhm.
I know quite a bit about it, I don't teach a lot of that
Mhm.
because I really stay in my lane.
Yeah.
I mean, the place I'm weaving more and more is the philosophy side,
Mhm.
um, but I still do that in kind of coming from the outer body, especially with athletes.
Yeah.
Athletes are just so in tune with their bodies and they're so coachable,
Mhm.
um, but it really requires shifting their perspective.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, I'm being very long-winded, but
You're great. I love it. I think what is so powerful about the way that you approach teaching and really leading and coaching, everyone you work with is that you have found points that create accessibility for whatever your message is, whatever the point you're trying to get across is. And for, I think, the people who are attracted to you, a way for them to access things that are new, information that may not be um that they may not be as familiar with, is through the intellectual piece and is through the physical body piece, especially with athletes. To your point, they are so in tune to their body. So that is like a natural access point. Yes, you can talk to me about my body or you can talk to me about my mind, and I'm going to understand that. And so then we can go that much further and deeper because you've met me where I am. You've met me where I can actually like appreciate and kind of receive the message that you're sharing, and then I'm in a place where I can go a little bit deeper because you've kind of like broken through probably a number of barriers, but at least one of them, right, to getting us to look at things differently and to shift our perspective and learn new things. And to your point, none of us can be all things to all people. And I think the best instructors, especially from a yoga standpoint that I've come across, are the ones who do stay in their lane and who what you're going to get from the stance that you're comfortable with how they're going to help you access something new, right? So you may not know their theme, you may not know the message. They're hopefully sharing, new insights with you every time you're on the mat with them, but they have this ability to, again, meet you where you are, create that access point, and then just open up this whole new world for you because in a place where you have that much less resistance to what may be something new, what may be uncomfortable, everything that we experience on and off our yoga mat.
Yeah, I mean, I have learned so much from you that, like, you start your workshops or even some of your written pieces, keep an open mind.
Mhm.
And some of the energy work that you're doing, people might hear words that they've never heard before. I mean, that's similar to my work. I
Yeah.
might talk about a body part there. I might talk about a syndrome that is actually very common that people just have never heard about before.
Mhm.
I talk a ton about posture. So I have a lot of corporate clients. I do a ton of one-on-one work. It's really the bulk of my business is private work. And a lot of people will say to me, I'm not an athlete. It's great you work with athletes, but can you recommend somebody? And I'll say, well, I work over 50% of my clientele is actually not athletes,
Mhm.
jockeys, maybe. I do a lot of work with corporate people that have chronic pain in their necks. And, so I in a lot of ways, especially with those people, or even with athletes or coaches, I a lot of times position myself as a movement specialist,
Yeah.
as because I really deploy functional movement and yoga
Mhm.
and kind of other biomechanics and other principles that, at the end of the day, I try to stay really true to alignment yoga.
Mhm.
And, but sometimes you have to go out of alignment to then find the alignment.
Right.
So, and the functional piece of it is, we are such a technologically driven culture and we have such bad posture.
Right.
And it isn't just kind of posture where we're moving, it's also holding patterns. Some people just stay in a position or chronic movement patterns. And that's big with athletes, but it's also big, with even just people shoveling their driveway or the snow or raking or in their jobs. I've worked with a lot of nurses in the past that have to move, patients like, in the ER or in
Right.
post-op, and they have bad backs. And, that's the most rewarding work for me is if people say, I have chronic pain, what can you do to help me? And let me
Mhm.
just make a quick point that I'm not a diagnoser. I never diagnose people. I mean,
Right.
I might say, oh boy, it sounds like you have a herniated disc, or it sounds like you might have a inflammation or a torn rotator cuff tear. But I usually don't take people on unless they have a diagnosis. That
Mhm.
I ask them to fill out an intake form. But I've pushed a lot of people to go get the clear data, like get
Yeah.
an MRI, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And so then when people are more knowledgeable about their bodies, and that's actually kind of what you said in the intro, that I think that's on my website too, that so many people have said to me that, and not just world-class athletes, but everybody, that the more they know about their bodies, they know about the psoas, or they might learn a little bit more about how shallow the shoulder joint is. They never knew how complicated the shoulder joint is. And then they see themselves doing, 25 chaturanga in
Mhm.
a class, and they never really learned how to do a chaturanga properly and
Right.
why they're having shoulder pain.
Right.
Um, and so once you learn a little more about, and biomechanics is really just force production. It's just how much force you're putting on, like the knees, like how
Mhm.
much, like I'm working with some high school gymnasts who have pain and like
Yeah.
growth plate. And anyway, I'm sorry, that's what I do. I go on
You're
and
good.
on.
It's all good. I love that connection between, the more knowledge we have of the physical body, the more empowered we can be, the more power we have, and more confidence we have. And I think that connection between, especially posture, but really the physical body in general, and confidence is so strong. Do you see that showing up with your clients, that the connection between the two?
Oh, I mean, it's just an unbelievable change. And, awareness is the first step to change. I mean, and again, I didn't make that up either, but
Yeah.
uh, a lot of people don't even realize how bad their posture is.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times I'll take pictures, pre-COVID and hopefully soon to be post-COVID, well, when COVID is canceled. take pictures of people. So right now I'm doing a lot of privates on Zoom. I was
Yeah.
actually doing private sessions on Zoom before COVID, even with people around the country. So what's cool about Zoom is that I can take a screen grab of people, even just standing or in a yoga pose, and then I can
Right.
immediately share my screen. So right there in real time, I can show them, where their postural faults are. And a lot of
Hmm.
times I'll take another image. Like I have these yoga anatomy images that might have a geometric shape or even like a T-square on
Oh,
it.
cool. Yeah.
Because so much of what I teach is kind of this idea of geometry or anatomy in action is what I
Hmm.
call it. But you're nailing the point about posture, right? So even on Zoom, when people are sitting a lot, like I just sat up when you said something about posture, and I noticed that too. Like even when I do lunch and learns in the corporate setting, or when I work with athletes and I have like a couple teams out in front of me, and I say something about posture, they all sit up. Even the coaches, are standing in the back and they're like looking around. Um, but when we hunch the shoulders down and we don't even realize we're doing it, we're impairing the pec minor, which is a part of our breathing apparatus, which helps to lift the rib cage up.
Right.
And then we're collapsing the lowest rib. And so we're actually reducing our lung capacity by about 30%. Which has huge implications for our functioning and for
Hmm.
our cognitive. And then they've shown in studies that our pec muscles are shorter and tighter than previous generations, and our upper shoulder back muscles are longer and weaker.
Isn't that
And so
interesting?
we're just creating this kyphosis in the body. And
Hmm.
the skeletal system, the three curves of the spine, are not designed to produce energy and be productive. And remember, the spinal column is, kind of the central nervous system, but it's the kind of the central command center,
Right.
not just for your, physical bones and muscles, but, for your endocrine system and your lymphatic system and your respiratory system, your circulatory system. So everything is impacted by that poor posture.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll have people, really sit up tall and they're just like, oh, this is so militaristic or this is so hard. And yet
Hmm.
once they do it a few times, then they start to realize they might not need that afternoon cup of coffee or that, chocolate bar or,
Right.
and then the other piece of it is just that posture impacts your mood.
Hmm.
And there's studies that really show that. I mean, and what are the studies doing? They put brain probes on people's brains. And so they're looking at like serotonin levels going up or down, or what happens with cortisol, stress hormone.
Right.
And so it's just really fascinating to analyze, the posture. And so that's the coolest part of my job. Like I'll literally have people stand against a wall and do just some really basic movement to get their shoulder girdle aligned, ear over shoulder, shoulder over hip.
Right.
And and people are like, oh my God, that's so hard.
Yeah.
Keeping your hand against the wall. And they don't even realize how hard that is. And then they do it a few times and then they're feeling better or they're sleeping better.
Oh, that's the biggest, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, that's the rewarding part of the job is, but there are no universal cues at the end of the day. I mean, of
Right.
course, there are universal cues in yoga, but yet, whether I work with athletes or people, you have to have, you have to come at it a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
Everyone brings their own trauma or their daily work patterns or their own movement issues that they might
Hmm.
have or expectations in their bodies or injury. Um, and so, it can take time. I mean, I tell people, it takes time to break those patterns and
Right.
to learn. And so the challenge is having people feel some progressive movement forward, like quickly,
Right.
even if
Right.
it's just incremental, feeling some sense of accomplishment in some way, some betterment in some way.
Hmm. I think it's so easy too for us to disconnect from our body. So to your point, giving people that screenshot, giving them the experience of, okay, what does it feel like, when your arms are up against the wall, along with the back line of your body being against the wall, so that you can start to see and feel, again, different access points in, so that you can reestablish that connection with your physical body, so that those cues that are there, but I think are so easy for us to miss. If my breathing is shallow, well, one thing I can check in with, is it because I'm completely hunched over and there's no way, even if I consciously tried to take a deep breath, that I could, so starting to notice, like, what does my body feel like this way versus that way, so that then, throughout my day to day, I can start to tune in, notice the awareness piece you talked about, and then kind of make a conscious choice to shift something. And, I think to your point, it can be a subtle shift. It doesn't, sometimes it's major for sure, but I think often it's those almost like micro movements that can have this ripple effect that you talked about. It's sleep, it's all these different systems throughout our body, it's our mood, all these different things that impact, at the end of the day, our quality of life. So what are the things that I can start becoming aware of? And then what are the choices I can start making, so that things do start to, even from a purely, an anatomical standpoint, how can I line things up the way they were meant to be lined up?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about choices, right? I mean, and that's really, we're just here to kind of introduce people to these different concepts, and people have choices, and to your point, this is not revolution.
Mm-mm.
Um, a lot of people, it's really subtle shifts, a small shifts that will
Yeah.
make a really big difference. And I mean, it takes about 60 times to break a pattern or a
Mm-hmm.
habit. It takes about 60 times to set the pattern of a habit. And so, people have to make a choice, but a lot of people are living in chronic pain,
Yeah.
or they maybe feel stagnant and they want to go another step in their career, or again in their sport, or whatever it is, or they just want to feel better. I mean, I think the pandemic has given people this sense of kind of looking for a new normal, and looking
Mm-hmm.
at the world around them, and changing some of their patterns and lifestyle, and
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting when you talk about the small shifts. I'm a huge proponent for using the yoga props, and I'll even have people put a yoga strap around their lower diaphragmatic band, and
Mm-hmm.
have them sit for a while, and maybe that's part of their homework in their corporate job, and just
Mm-hmm.
to notice how their upper body is starting to slump over that. I use the yoga block a lot at the inner thighs,
Yep.
because a lot of times the brain and the body, you have to kind of reestablish a connection.
Right.
And again, that's some of the work that you do so brilliantly, is kind of this energetic piece. And it's like we've kind of shut off part of our brains. During the pandemic, a lot of people have gained some weight, or again, they couldn't go to their gym, so their whole movement patterns have changed, and or their jobs have changed. I mean, I feel so much for teachers
I
who,
know.
I mean, I have teachers that come to class or come to privates, and they're crying.
Yeah.
They're so stressed, and so yeah, so that again, the shifts in the body can be really subtle, but the use of the props sometimes helps. In the studio, I might go over to a student, just kind of give a directional hit to the shoulder, just
Right.
as a reminder for that proprioception, which sometimes the student can't get there on their own.
Right.
And so that's what the props will sometimes do, using the wall, or using a block, or a strap, or even the bolster, whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
really, really helpful. And that's again where we just kind of get creative in problem solving.
Right. Right. I think too, that takes us off of autopilot, right? So if we don't normally use a prop in yoga, and our teacher is encouraging us to, and really off the mat too, it definitely applies, those things that you can do a little bit differently, especially if if it's something that you've got, habit or just routine built around where it's unconscious, this is how I do downward facing dog, or this is how I drive to work, whatever the case may be, this is how I sit at the computer, all these things. So if you then, I love the idea of introducing a prop so that your brain really has something else to think about, and kind of that sensation can be different. Oh, I've been in this pose a million times, or I've been in this position a million times, but I've never been in it this way with this prop or this cue. So does that allow me to, again, become aware, reconnect, to the mind and body, and then determine, okay, what's going to serve me best right here? How can I breathe better? How can my posture be more aligned? How can, if you take
Yeah,
it a step further, how can I show up more fully, in this
right.
moment using that type of cue?
Yeah, I mean, again, just so well said. A lot of people kind of sleepwalk through their yoga practice a little bit. And I'm a big promoter of familiarity. Like,
Hmm.
we'll go back to a pose a lot of times, but um, a lot of people can kind of sleepwalk through, if you will. And what I've been starting language I've been starting to use lately is that, the muscles are big and wide. I mean, depending on the muscle, but think of a muscle like even just as a square. If you were to step into a lunge the same way every time,
Hmm.
you're only going to, think of the square as like a pool. You're only going to be in one lane in the
Yeah.
pool, right? Well, guess what? There's open swim going on right now, and you want to go into some of the other lanes in the pool. And so that's where, to your point, like propping, like I put the front foot a lot up on a block, especially for my clients that might have hip replacement or hip
Yeah.
injury or just super tight, or I just want them to feel a warrior one differently, so
Right.
that when they bring their foot off the block, their body and they're the muscle memory, and they've stopped sleepwalking in the pose.
Yes. Yeah.
And a great philosophical element to yoga is this idea of kind of the vigor and then the ease, or the
Yeah.
strength and the ease. And it's really kind of a metaphor for life, that
Hmm.
you shouldn't be sleepwalking through your yoga practice, that
Right.
there's a sense of strength. Like, so how can I strengthen, where can I find more stability, so that my breath, to your point, I might have more freedom in my breath, right? Or how do I
Hmm.
strengthen my legs a little more in this pose so that I can get freedom in my spine, so that I
Yes.
can elongate the spine, right? So that I can
Yeah.
come back to more of a neutral spine. Or,
Yep.
how can I make a shift in the physical body so that I have a sense of ease? I mean, it sounds crazy when you say people should find that sense of shavasana, that final pose, that sense of almost restorative,
Right.
even in like an arm balance.
Right.
And so that comes back to some of that around biomechanical alignment, but it also comes to not being on autopilot.
Hmm.
And sometimes in yoga we make people hold poses longer than they want to, but that's again another metaphor for life. Like,
Right.
sometimes in life we have to do things we don't want to do,
Hmm.
or we have to find some endurance or some tenacity or some. On the flip side, though, there's never pain. Like, we don't want
Right.
to promote pain, but we're promoting discomfort.
Right.
Um, and so anyway, I'll make one more quick point, which is that even though I have a tagline, which is elevate your edge,
Hmm.
and that is really, kind of getting at this idea of not sleepwalking through your life. And again, you so brilliantly teach about mindfulness and really being in the pose moment by moment. And just,
Right.
but, I'm not a huge believer in always going to the edge.
Right.
And, even though we can talk about that transformation happens at the edge, and yes, sometimes that discomfort, or pushing yourself, like even in a tree pose with your eyes closed and you're going to topple over, you're not going to hurt yourself.
Hmm.
But push your comfort zone a little bit. But I'm a big proponent of kind of finding a little bit of a center place.
Hmm.
And sometimes the body responds better. Like, again, if I'm working with really tired athletes who are training really hard or in the middle of a season,
Right.
um, I might bring them back a little bit, and don't be so kind of pushing. You know, a lot of yogis are pushing and pushing, or a lot of people are on a timeline. Like I said, I wanted to touch my toes by the end of the month. And how are we doing on my timeline?
Yeah. It's that harmony, I think, between effort and ease, right? And finding that, when you have those experiences on the yoga mat, okay, what happens when you experience discomfort? Like, what's the thought track in your mind? What's the postural response when your physical body gets a little bit uncomfortable? And then figuring out how to create that balance or that harmony that you talk about, and then taking that off the mat, right? So the next time, you're in a meeting or in an uncomfortable conversation with a family member or something like that, you've had that basically physiological experience where you can say, wait a minute, I've got a solution here of what I can do to take care of myself in this moment because I've experienced it before and I got through it and was fine, right? So I just love that idea of the access points and being able to meet people where they are. You can practice this, on your yoga mat, and then apply it to really every area of your life off the yoga mat. And I just think the ripple effects are so cool.
It really is. And, at the end of the day, we in the health and wellness field, I mean, people are looking to us to, kind of live, sometimes my friends, my high school friends have known me forever, or grade school friends. We've had a couple sad situations, some sickness and kind of the small group. And, a lot of people will say to me, Leslee, you're a calming force, or you're good, you're bringing good energy to a stressful situation. Now, it doesn't mean I sugarcoat everything.
Right. Yeah. Big difference.
And I'll remind people a lot just that you really are only as powerful as the depth of your breath. That, when we get really stressed, we really get much more shallow with our breathing. And if that's one thing people take away from yoga or a movement practice, like I work with a lot of athletes who are injured, who are coming out of surgery, or even older people. I have a couple 80-plus-year-old clients who come out of surgery, and I will work with them just on pranayama, just on breathing.
Yep.
And getting athletes to do like a kapalabhati, which is like a rapid or bastrika. They at least feel like they're doing something. It's finding skulls, so they might start feeling. So the power of the breath is just really a huge proponent of health and wellness. That and as we know, that's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. It's just such an important part of it.
Yeah.
But back to kind of the beginning of the discussion, there's a lot of times when I'm working with new yogis or athletes, or even people coming back to the mat, they still need some time getting into the postures before they can really start like a pranayama practice. And so keeping it simple. Keeping it simple is as effective as, trying to do something more complicated. And then again, giving people tools to take off the mat, to your point. And finding, when people text me and say, I just got in an argument with my boss, and I paused, and then I took a step back, and then I tapped into my breath, and I didn't respond. I mean, somebody sent me that text the other day, and she's like, I almost got fired because I was about to just give them the F-bomb. Which I'm supportive of that word. But and so that's like self-control, that's empowerment. I mean, and that's just what's cool about the yoga practice, and about movement, and about about these modalities that you and I work in. And it's just really great.
It's so great. I love that. And that is still ringing in my head. Your words, we're only as powerful as the depth of our breath. Oh my gosh, that is gold right there. Friends, if you take nothing else away, take that away. Because, and even that example you gave, of the person who was almost fired, that's breath work, right? I mean, being able to pause and take a breath, that is especially in a heated and high stress situation. I mean, that's life changing, really. And
Well,
isn't it? Yeah, go
and
ahead.
well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, because you say I learn from you when you talk. But it's just about, you know, the more people learn to find their breath, the more they can find a sense of trust
Yeah.
in the decisions that they're making too.
Hmm.
That, you know, you instead, I mean, I'm all for being spontaneous, don't get me wrong. I mean, my
Sure.
whole life I've been a really spontaneous person. In my older years, I'm getting a little less spontaneous. You know, it's about this kind of blend of kind of effort and ease. It's this blend of kind of being spontaneous or being uh, you know um, living life, joie de vivre, if you
Yeah.
will, but also being really considered, you know.
Hmm.
And so when we breathe deeper and we kind of pause for a minute, and we even teach that, pausing at the top of the inhale, pausing at the top of the inhale, savoring that pause,
Yeah.
it then gives you the ability to make like really good decisions because you're pausing and you're being considered, you're considering the situation.
Hmm.
And you know, at the end of the day, if you make a decision a while ago, being mindful, you were rational about it, and then you put it through your emotional sieve and your intuition,
Right.
and then you look back, you know, a year later, you look back and you're like, why did I make that decision? Well, it was all the information you had at the time.
Hmm.
And so you have to trust that decision then.
Right.
And then you make a different decision a year later. But as long as you're doing things again considered, right? And so, I mean, do we have to make split second decisions all the time? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But if we learn to find like the calmness in the breath, like an even inhale and a soft, quiet but powerful exhale, if we
Right.
learn that, that's why we teach that on the yoga mat, so that it becomes second nature off of the yoga mat,
Hmm.
right? We go from being consciously incorrect,
Hmm.
like we're aware of how messed up we are in our posture, our breathing, to then being unconsciously correct, right?
Hmm.
But there's a process that has to go through. You have to keep breaking
Right.
that pattern. You have to keep noticing how shallow your breath is, and then take those few deep breaths, and
Right.
so you don't
And
get
I
tired.
think, yeah, the more you do that too, the easier it is to make those split second decisions, not from a place of like fear and panic, because you've already set kind of all your systems up in the best way possible, right? So you are less stressed, to uber simplify it. You're less stressed than you may have been if you weren't doing all of those things leading up until that moment.
Right, right. And what a bad place to come from, a place of fear,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
um, instead feeling more empowered. And then I think it's like cyclical and it grows on itself. And then the more empowered you feel, the better decisions you might make, the more empowered you feel. And, you know, even if you look back and say, you know, I could have made a different decision there, but you have a sense of trust.
Right.
And again, that's part of the energy work that I love that you do is, you know, really, you know, having that sense of trust, almost this sense of, you know, putting it out into the universe a little bit too. I mean, we can
Hmm.
only control so much, you know,
Right.
we're not,
Yeah,
so
I totally agree. Oh, it's so great. Leslee, what is on the horizon for you? What's coming up that you're excited about?
gosh, so much stuff. You know, I really work with a lot of different segments in the population.
Yeah.
So I am teaching some regular classes right now, and I probably will continue to some degree. But I'm working on a training. I have done some teacher trainings. I do anatomy lecturing and teacher trainings, and that's really my heart is there. You know, a lot of times my yoga teaching is people kind of study yoga or anatomy with me, and then they practice with other people, even though I
Hmm.
teach additional classes too. So I'm developing two different trainings in different capacities. I'm working on an assistantship. I'm really, you know, like so many people, trying to figure out my place in social justice. And my daughter is a huge inspiration for me. She's a really big social justice lawyer in college, and so she's kind of helping me find some appropriate and authentic places to serve.
I love that.
And so I'm developing like a mentorship program or an assistantship program, not from a white saviorism perspective. So I'm being very careful, and I'm really taking my time
Yeah.
trying to help young or new, they don't have to be young, yoga teachers who maybe are coming from marginalized communities, helping them to build a business. So it's
Right.
a sustainable thing long term, and doing some other work in yoga service.
Good.
Um, and then I'm also starting a community for injured athletes or injured people. And I'm adding in there my whole work with menopause and premenopause. And so that's just kind of another segment. I broke my thumb this year. I have a bad shoulder. I have a lot of people I work with who are injured in some way, so that they don't feel like they're operating at their best, but they
Mhm.
are operating at a different best.
Right.
And so just some different stuff.
I
And
love it. So exciting.
yeah, I mean, the world is, in need. Hybrid models here to stay. I
Mhm.
will. I'm starting to do stuff with people in person again, but I will stay on Zoom
Cool.
and have access to people how they need to be working together. And so yeah, so just a lot of cool stuff. And you're doing the coolest stuff. I mean, on my free time, I'm coming to your
I
workshops.
love having you. It's such a good exchange. I love that so much. Leslee, if people want to learn more, to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a website. I'm actually redoing my website right now as we speak. But it's just tuneyoga.com, like sing a tune, tuneyoga.com.
Perfect.
And there's a link in there or like a little envelope. You can send me a message. And I have some people that are not paying still, people that lost their jobs or furloughed. Please come practice with me, send me a note. And, I mean, yoga teachers need to be compensated. That's a whole other discussion about, where we are and kind of the health and wellness. But, I have a service to offer, as do you, Meg. And during the pandemic in particular, people needed community and they needed that service. And so hopefully there are no barriers to practicing.
Good.
And so tuneyoga.com.
I love that. And everybody is welcome. I say that from the bottom of my heart, having been a student of Leslee's for quite a long time. Everyone is welcome in her class, and there is, I think, something for everyone if you're willing to show up and learn. And I think it's the most wonderful gift. And I always leave your classes, your workshops, even our chats on the phone or through text, I always leave with a higher vibration. I always leave with a new nugget of something, whether it's research that I know is just going to have a ripple effect throughout my life, or a new way to sit at my computer or whatever it is. So friends, I highly, highly recommend you reach out and connect with Leslee. She has just the most wonderful gifts to offer, and you will benefit immensely from those interactions with her. Leslee, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insight. I love you so much. Friends watching, from my heart, from Leslee's heart, we send you so much love and light. And if you liked this, we would be so grateful for a thumbs up. And you can subscribe. I'll have more brilliant superwomen like Leslee on, as well as some meditation and mindset videos too. Leslee, thank you again.
Thank you so much.